Hello all, welcome to Hitbullseye. In this session of topic of the week, bulldoze topic of the week, today we are going to cover up one of the very important issue of geopolitics, right? That is Israel-Gaza conflict. Not basically it's an Israel-Gaza conflict, it's an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Gaza is a small land which belongs to Palestinian region. So we are going to discuss what is the news, why it is in news in this week, and what is the history of Israel, and what is the history of Israel and Palestinian issue. So it is one of the very important topics of geopolitics, right? And it affects each and every country around this planet, right? So that's why it's one of the most complicated geopolitical issue. It affects economic aspect, it affects political aspect, and as well as it affects the regional aspect, right? So that's why this is one of the very important topic. So we are going to cover up the historical aspect of this news and why this Israeli-Palestinian conflict will going to affect Indian economy, right? Indian politics as well as regional politics. So first of all, we need to understand where is Israel right now. So Israel is very small. It's a very small country here, right? Like the circle that I just made here. It's a very small country here. Initially, this area was called as Palestine. This area was called as Palestine. Now, how this Israel came into existence? That's a topic of debate right now. That's a topic of this class, and this whole area, the green area which you are seeing right now, it's a Arab dominated area. It's an Arab dominated area, right? So this issue basically starts at the end of 1800. I would like to say by mid 1850s. This area was started in mid 1850s. Why? What happened in 1850s? Because at this time the construction of Suez Canal took place. So the construction of Suez Canal completed in 1869. 1869, and this construction of after completion of this Suez Canal. Now, why Suez Canal was important? The only reason behind the importance of Suez Canal is, so when Europeans started trading with the eastern part of Asia, so they have to come all around Africa and then reach to Southeast Asia. So after the construction of Suez Canal, here is it Egypt, right? So here's a small canal, so 193 kilometer long Suez Canal, long man-made canal. So this Europe will directly go to this area to Southeast Asia, right? So from this portion, from this area, the Jew people they started claiming that we have our ancestral land which was called as Israel. So every year they take a pledge that next new year we're going to celebrate in Israel, right? So for last 2000 years they were taking pledge each and every year, so because they want their own land. The only reason is they were persecuted for a very long time. The reason of persecution is because some says that some historians says that Jews got cursed, that till the time this earth will remain and this whole civilization will remain, Jews will continue to get persecuted. The only reason is the death of Jesus Christ was because of Jews, because they give the information of Jesus Christ to Romans, the Roman king, and Roman king crucified Jesus Christ. So that's why they say the Jews have curse on them, that they will continue to get persecuted. So for all around Europe, whether it's an Russian Jews or whether it's an Iranian Jews or whether it's German Jews or Polish Jews, they will get persecuted. So now this whole issue, take a speed in 1897. Now what had happened in 1897? World Zionist Organization was started. World Zionist Organization was formed. In this World Zionist Organization, it was that organization which supports the Israeli land, which these are those people who wants that there should be a country called as Israel. So Jews has a very long-term demand that we want our own country, and that where that country will be, in this Palestinian region, right? The country will be in Palestinian region. Then in 1914 World War I started. 1914 World War I started, and Jews are basically their economic ideology is capitalist in nature, right? In present world, when you see big bankers of the world, and even at that time the large bankers, they are all from the Jew community. So basically capitalists want to win that you can say that the ally power, they were all capitalist in nature, so they want to win World War I. So for that they have to control the money supply, so that Germans or Axis power didn't get economic support in that war. So that's why they want Jew support on this side. So for that, in 1917, it's a very important year for Israel, there was a Balfour Declaration. Who was Balfour Declaration? Who was Balfour? Balfour was External Affairs Secretary of United Kingdom. So he says in this declaration, what they say is that we recognize that there should be a land, there should be a separate country for Jews, that is Israel, where the Palestine is. So when 1919, after the end of World War II, before 1919, Jews were scattered all around Europe. So when 1919 World War I ended, so this Palestinian region, or the Jordan region, Palestinian region, Libyan region, so this came under the control of Brits. It came under control of Britishers. So after that, Jews started moving to Israel, and Britishers didn't stop them. And slowly, when the number of refugees they entered into Palestine, the tension starts rising. So meanwhile, in 1939, when World War II started, again there was a persecution on Jews. We all know about the Holocaust. After the Holocaust, it gave again the perspective of Europeans against Jews. Now it comes into favor of them, right? So now when they got persecuted, they get more motivated that they want their own land. So after World War II, when finished in 1945, there was a huge refugee influx in Israel, which again started the rising of tension. The tension was started rising. Then in 1947, finally, when there was a conflict in the Palestinian region, the United Nations entered here. The United Nations says what? The United Nations says, you can see this map. The United Nations says that this green area, this is a land which is in 1946. This green area, it is of Arabs. This blue area, it is of Israel. And there is one more area which is Jerusalem. Now, why Jerusalem is important? Jerusalem is important for three religions, all three Abrahamic religions. Christianity, because why? Because Jesus Christ was crucified there. Jews, because the first temple, which they consider to be the first temple in the world, it is in Jerusalem. And third, for the Muslims, because the third highest, the holiest shrine of Muslims, that is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, it is in Jerusalem. So that's why all these religions, they want to control Jerusalem. So even Jews also want the same. Now here United Nations steps into this conflict, and they says the one portion, it will be under the control of Jews, and the another portion, it will be under the control of Arabs, and the Jerusalem will be under the control of United Nations. This was the UN resolution. But here, the neighboring Arab countries, now they don't want any external religion or any external economic force, or you can say that an external pawn to enter into this region, right? So after that, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Libya, they attacked Israel, and this came to be the first Arab-Israel war, right? Egypt, Jordan, Iraq and Syria, they attacked Israel, but in 1948, when this war ended, because of lack of coordination, because of lack of that trained army, Israel won that war, and it again increases the control, right here. It increases the control on the Palestinian areas, and this area that you are seeing in a very this stripe of green land, this land is called as Gaza, and this portion it is called as West Bank. This was called as First Israel War. Now the Second Israel War took place in 1956. Now why 1956? Now 1956, now Russians enter into the game. Now here is this issue is also called as Suez Canal crisis. When Russians enter into game, Russian wants to give $200 million to Egyptians, and Egyptians also want that because Egyptians want to build dam on Nile River. But because of Cold War, there was an immense international pressure. Not international pressure here means the pressure of Uncle Sam, that is United States, Britain and French, because Suez Canal was it was made by the capitalists of French and Brits. So here they don't want that any external force, especially Russians, enter into this game. So they put an immense pressure, intense pressure on Egyptian government that not to take money from Russians. So in counter of that, the president or the prime minister of Egyptian, that is Abdul Nasser, he decided to nationalize the Suez Canal. So after nationalizing of Suez Canal, so ultimately what would happen? They will extract money from international trade, because right now, at that time and even right now, 12% of international trade, it goes through the Suez Canal, right? So he planned to take that 200 million or more money from after this nationalization, from this nationalization this project of Suez Canal. Here Britishers and France, what he was thinking, it was good for his country, but Brits and France, they don't want Abdel Nasser to do that. So there was a secret operation planned by Britishers and French forces. Now here Israel, with the help of Israel, and or you can say that Israel enters into this game. Now why Israel enters into this game? Because here you will find this place is called as Suez Canal. So when they see the Israelis were supporting Britishers and French, Egyptians blocked the trade of Israelis, right? So in counter of that, is with the help of Israelis, Britishers and French, or these two countries, and with the help of Israelis, they attacked Egypt and they occupied Sinai Peninsula. So as soon as you cross Sinai Peninsula, it is also called as Sinai Desert. So as soon as they captured Sinai Peninsula, so the very next, the western part of Sinai Peninsula, that is the Suez Canal. So Sinai Peninsula was under the control of Israelis. But with the immense pressure from United States, Israelis withdraw their forces. So this was the second Arab-Israel war. Then there was third Arab-Israel war, which happened in 1967. Then there was third Arab-Israel war, which happened in 1967. The main reason behind this third Arab-Israel war is there was attacks, the terror attacks on Israeli occupied area. So they don't want the people of Israel to suffer more. So then Israel attacked again Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iran. So in that, from this war, you can say that whole conflict, it just erupts. So after this attack, Israel fully controlled this Gaza Strip. Israel fully controlled this Western Bank. This Western Bank was initially in the control of Jordanians. Now this Western Bank was under the fully control of Israelis. But initially, according to United Nations as well, and according to previous treaties as well, they says that Gaza will be under the control of Palestinians and Western Banks will be under control of Palestinians. Gaza and Western Bank both will under the control of Palestinians. But in 1967, Israelis took control of this Western Bank, Golan Heights as well as Gaza. Now whole of the Palestinian area was under the control of Israelis, and even Sinai area of Egypt, it again comes under the control of you can say that Israelis. But again in 1973, fourth war took place. Now fourth war took place. The reason of this fourth war is to again regain the area that is occupied by the Israelis. But at that time, you must note that OPEC, there was a formation of OPEC countries, or Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And they have a huge control over the economies of the world because they have control over energy sources. So when in 1973 Yom Kippur, it is also called a Yom Kippur War, when the Yom Kippur War broke out, Arabs, they cut down the production of oil and they increase the prices of crude oil. They just quadruple the prices of crude oil. Initially when it was $3, so after this war they increased the prices by $12. So there was an acute shortage around the world. Ultimately it affects world economies, and at that time Indian economy also gets affected, because in 1971 there was already war with Pakistan when Bangladesh Liberation War took place, and there were two monsoons, the failed monsoons were there, and after this rising of crude oil prices, there was a reduction in food production, and ultimately it is also considered to be one of the reason behind national emergency which was imposed by Mrs. Indira Gandhi government. So this was about the fourth. That's why Indian economy or Indian Indian society gets affected by this conflict. Now, what does present conflict says? Then in 1995, Oslo Accord took place. In this Oslo Accord, the parties were Israel and PLO. PLO was an organization called as Palestinian Liberation Organization. So they made an accord, they signed a peace deal that is the controlled area, that Israel that control the area of Gaza and Western Bank, the Israel will liberate that area and it will be under control of Palestinians. But here in 1987, there was the formation of Hamas. You must have heard about Hamas. Hamas is an terrorist organization, and there is one more group which came into existence. There is Fatah group, FATAH. But when time passes, after 20 years or almost 20 years, in 2006, Hamas came into power. Hamas is an orthodox group, and they says that we'll liberate whole of Israel from whole of the Palestinians from Israel. But Fatah group is who supported this Oslo Accord. So in short, Hamas group is who opposes this Oslo Accord, and Fatah group is who favors the Oslo Accord. So there's again a rise in tension, and since then the tension is rising. So this is a basic, you can say that, or very brief version of what is the issue between Israel and Palestine. So what is the present situation here? You know, what happened in recent past? Recently, Israeli conducted this air attacks on Gaza Strip. Why? Because there is a group in Gaza. Otherwise, Gaza is controlled by Hamas, and Western Bank is controlled by Fatah. So Gaza is controlled by Hamas, and there is one more group which is called as PIJ, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It is called as Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Israel says that Palestinian Islamic Jihad, this group, they were planning to attack on Israel. So in retaliation of that, before that attack, they launched the air strikes. They launched more than 100 airstrikes, which killed many Palestinians, right? So in this situation, Israeli says we took preventive measures. but in retaliation of that, PIJ also conducted, or with the help of Hamas definitely, they conducted rocket attacks. So this is happening each and every year, or why this is happening? So basically, who is correct here? The point is, the first question mark is who is correct here. So I would say I'm not going to comment on this matter. Why? Because no one is correct. This Hamas or PIJ, they are going on a path of violence, which any civilized society will not support it. On the other hand, Israelis conduct these attacks just to win future elections, because there's an upcoming election in Israel, and since last 3 or 4 tenures, no party in Israel they get majority. So that's why the present government of Israel, they want full majority. So that's why they are conducting attacks there, just to gain their popularity and just to gain their a strong stance against the Palestinian cause. So here, what's the India's stand? So since 1948, when Israel took place, India has a very firm stance that Palestinians should get their right. So India didn't fully support Israel, and India didn't fully support Palestinian also. The reason behind is because India is dependent on Arabs for their energy needs. So if any wrong step, any miscalculated diplomatic approach, the Arabs will choke the oil production or oil supplies to India, which ultimately affects our economy. So that's why, yes, we have a very good relation with Israel, but we don't want to go on bad terms with Israel as well, because at present Israel is the 3rd largest trading partner of India in the Asian region, as well as we are also dependent on Israel on various defense purchases and defense of our country. For example, drones, for example, surface to air missiles. So we get it from Israel. So we are dependent on Israel from economic as well as on a defense lines. On the other hand, we want to have a very good relation with Arabs. The only reason is because we are dependent on Arabs for our energy needs, right? So India don't want to be on a crossroads, like the same way in the Ukrainian-Russian crisis, we are getting backlash from European countries that why we are buying oil from Russia. But our government has very clear stance on it. In the same way, since last 70 years, our government has very clear stance that yes, we want to have a very good relation with Israelis, and on the other hand, we want to have a very good relation with Arabs as well, right? So in both way, you can say that this is a very balanced approach by our Indian diplomats as well as by Indian government. So any wrong miscalculation here leads to economic and defense defense crisis in to our country. So this was the whole issue of Israeli and Palestinian crisis, and how this issue will affect whole world. So this was the whole issue. So if you get something knowledgeable from this lecture, please like this video, share this video. So we'll meet same time, same place in the next class. Till then, I'm signing off now. Thank you.